Welcome to Philosophy Insights. We will discuss a few clips by Professor Jordan Peterson.
In this talk, he gives a motivational speech and advice about how to shape your life in the way you want it to be.
When I'm in my clinical practice and I observe, and this is also the case with my students, is let's say people's lives aren't what they would like them to be. And so then you ask, why? Well, forget about tragedy and catastrophe, because that's self-evident, and we're not going to discuss that. Although the degree to which you bring about your own tragedy is always indeterminate. But I would never say that every terrible thing that is visited on a person is something they deserved. I think that that's a very dangerous presupposition, especially because everyone gets sick and everyone dies. But one of the main reasons that people don't get what they want is because they don't actually figure out what it is. And the probability that you're going to get what would be good for you, let's say, which would even be better than what you want, right? Because, you might be wrong about what you want easily. But maybe you could get what would really be good for you. Well, why don't you? Well, because you don't try. You don't think, okay, here's what I would like if I could have it. And I don't mean in a way that you manipulate the world to force it to deliver you goods for status or something like that. That isn't what I mean. I mean something like, imagine that you were taking care of yourself like you were someone you actually cared for. And then you thought, okay, I'm caring for this person. I would like things to go as well for them as possible. What would their life have to be like in order for that to be the case? Well, people don't do that. They don't sit down and think, all right, let's figure it out. You've got a life. It's hard, obviously. It's like 3 years from now, you can have what you need. You got to be careful about it. You can't have everything. You can have what would be good for you, but you have to figure out what it is, and then you have to aim at it. Well, my experience with people has been if they figure out what it is that would be good for them, and then they aim at it, then they get it. And it's strange because it's a strange thing. It's not quite that simple because, you may formulate an idea about what would be good for you, and then you take 10 steps towards that, and you find out that your formulation was a bit off, and so you have to reformulate your goal. So you're kind of going like this as you move towards the goal. But a huge part of the reason that people fail is because they don't ever set up the criteria for success. And so, since success is a very narrow line and very unlikely, the probability that you're going to stumble on it randomly is 0. And so there's a proposition here, and the proposition is, if you actually want something, you can have it. Now the question then would be, well, what do you mean by actually want? And the answer is that you reorient your life in every possible way to make the probability that that will occur as certain as possible. And that's a sacrificial idea, right? It's like, you don't get everything. Obviously. But maybe you can have what you need. And maybe all you have to do to get it is ask. But the asking isn't a whim or today's wish. It's like, you have to be deadly serious about it. You have to think, okay, like I'm taking stock of myself. And if I was going to live properly in the world and I was going to set myself up such that being would justify itself in my estimation, and I don't mean as a harsh judge, exactly what is it that I would aim at? Well, one of the things I've found is that in test of this theory, let's say, you could try this. This is a form of prayer, knocking. Sit on your bed one day and ask yourself, what remarkably stupid things am I doing on a regular basis to absolutely screw up my life? And if you actually ask that question, but you have to want to know the answer, right? Because that's actually what asking the question means. It doesn't mean just mouthing the words. It means you have to decide that you want to know. You'll figure that's out so fast it'll make your hair curl. It's as if Jung thought about this. He thought that people had 2 poles of consciousness, and one was the individual consciousness that we each identify with, and the other was something he called the self, and the self is you might think about it as the divine within. That's close enough approximation. It's the universal part of your consciousness. It's your conscience. That's another way of thinking about it. whatever your conscience is, but it's something that you can consult. It's like the Socratic daemon. Socrates said that the thing that made him different than everyone else in Greece was that he consulted his daemon, his genius. He asked himself how it was that he should conduct himself in the world, and then he did that, whatever it was. He didn't try to force a solution, you know, he didn't try to force a solution selfishly. He asked, I'm going to manifest myself in the best possible manner in the world. I would like to do that. What would that be? Well, you're perfectly capable of thinking. God only knows how. You're perfectly capable of immense feats of imagination and dream and fantasy. God only knows how you do all of that. What would happen if you consulted yourself about the best possible outcome for you? You might get an answer. Well, that's what this proposition is. Or what man is there of you whom if his son asks for bread will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish will give him a serpent? If ye then being evil know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask him? Well, this is a question about the fundamental nature of being, I suppose. And one of the hypotheses in the New Testament, which is different, it's a different hypothesis in some sense than the one that structures the Old Testament, is that faith makes being good. It's a very interesting proposition, and so the notion would be, and it's an action-oriented issue as well. You act out the proposition that if you act properly in the world, that being will reveal itself to you as benevolent. But you will not know. You'll never know unless you do it. So this is a call to that. Act out the proposition that if you act properly, that being itself is benevolent. There's no reason to assume the contrary. I mean, to assume the contrary would be to be as cynical and bitter as possible, and it's not like we don't have reason for that. It's not like I don't understand why that happens to people. Therefore, all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do you even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets. And that's a reciprocity issue, right? It's like, well, imagine what would be, this is another thing I learned from Jung, because Jung reversed this, because this is often read, it's the golden rule. It's often read as be nice to other people. It's like, that is not what this rule means. It doesn't mean that even a little bit. It means something like, and we'll reverse it so that we'll concentrate on you rather than the other person to begin with. It means something like, conceptualize how things could be great if they were great for you, if you were taking care of yourself, and then work to make that the case for everyone else. You know, you see that in Buddhism, because Buddha reached nirvana, right? That's the theory. And then he was tempted with the offer to stay there. And he rejected that offer and came back to the profane world because he felt that the attainment of nirvana was insufficient unless everyone attained it simultaneously. And so it's something like that. But it's treat yourself properly. That's a hard thing to do because you're a fallen, shameful, cowardly, deceitful, malevolent, mortal creature. And so it's not easy, and you know it, and it's not easy to treat something like that properly. And it isn't obvious that people treat themselves better than they treat other people. I don't think that's obvious at all. But maybe you could start with yourself and think, okay, I'm going to take care of myself as if I have value. What would that look like? And then I'm going to work to extend that courtesy to everyone else.
Thank you for watching this video, and if you like the content, subscribe to Philosophy Insights.